there, and welcome to The Imperfect Painter. I'm Rachael McCampbell, and I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm going to show you how to gesso a wooden panel. First of all, why do we put gesso on canvases, wood, and other substrates? Well, oil has ingredients in it that can literally eat through and damage the painting surface. And without a protectant barrier there, like gesso, the substrate can adversely affect the paint on top of it by bleeding through. For example, if some sort of sap were on the wood, it could bleed through the paint if the gesso wasn't there. So to avoid any problems with cracking or discoloration, artists for centuries have sized their substrates and used sizing and gesso. Gesso is basically gypsum or calcium carbonate mixed with titanium dioxide to whiten it. Gesso primes the surface to protect the substrate like we discussed, but it also creates a welcoming surface that isn't too slick. It's something that paint can grip onto. You buy canvases and wooden panels pre-gessoed, yes, but sometimes I find those a little too slick. The paint wants to slide right off. So often I first sand it and add a few layers of my own gesso just to roughen it up a bit. It's best to let your acrylic dry for at least 2 hours before painting it, and preferably 2 days to let it cure completely. So, okay, let's get started. I'm going to begin today with a 24 by 24 inch unprimed cradled wood panel by Dick Blick. I'm going to check the surface to make sure it's really smooth, but I'm going to use a fine grit sandpaper, 150, to roughen it up and create some tooth to help hold the gesso. I want to make sure that the surface is dust-free, so I'll wipe it off with a good quality paper towel or cloth. I prefer to use a vinyl brush when applying gesso. I find the hairs to be very soft and supple, and they don't create a lot of texture like a chip brush might do. Plus, they don't shed as much. I keep squeegees on hand to smooth out any unwanted textures, and I have a bowl to pour my fluid medium into. Now, some artists use gesso directly on the wood panel, and that works, but I like to size the canvas or panel first. This is an extra layer of protection. In the old days, the masters used rabbit skin glue, which is still used today. But it's hygroscopic, meaning it can absorb water from the humidity in the air and cause cracking of paint, especially on canvases. You can apply 2 layers of GAC 100 or Golden's Fluid Matte Medium, which dries clear. After it's dried, you can apply the gesso. For the first layer of gesso, I'm going to paint horizontally, moving the brush from side to side over the whole panel. On that first coat, you really want to push the brush into the texture of the wood and make sure that it's being absorbed into the grain. If you're planning on doing a really highly textured painting, then the roughness of your gesso won't really matter. But if you want a smooth surface, I suggest you use a squeegee and barely drag it across the surface just to smooth out those brush marks. I sometimes moisten my brush again with water and run it back over the panel to eliminate any unwanted textures. This is a Messermeister silicone bowl scraper that I really like to use on my larger panels. Just dragging it across creates a beautifully smooth surface. This is a normal white gesso, but if you like to tone your panels, you might want to consider adding an acrylic paint color to your gesso so that you're achieving 2 things at once. Or you can purchase pre-colored gessos in the art store. And don't forget to paint your edges of your panel too, especially if they're going to be in a float frame where you can see them. I like to paint them with gesso and then paint them with a very dark, almost black color on the sides. After the first layer of gesso is dry, about 1 or 2 hours usually, I get out the fine sandpaper again and I go over it to make sure everything is nice and smooth, and then I clean that off. Now it's time for the second layer, which we will paint in the opposite direction. So this time I'm going to go vertically with a brush up and down to crosshatch and make sure that the entire panel is covered evenly. Again, if you're going for a smooth surface, then pull out your squeegee and lightly drag it across the panel. You can also purchase clear gesso, which works wonderfully over substrates where you want the base to show through. For example, you can gesso an old piece of wood that has great texture and grains by using clear gesso. You can still see all the wood beneath it. If you apply translucent paint glazes or stains on top of it, you will still see clearly that wood below. I've noticed there are a few spots here that look a little thin, so I'm going to go ahead and add some more gesso and smooth that out. Make sure and check your edges to ensure that the gesso hasn't dripped over the sides. You want to smooth all of that out. Okay, so I gessoed our panel one last time to total 1 layer of sizing and 3 layers of gesso in all. I sanded it and this is the final result. I'm really pleased with this. It's smooth yet still has a tooth to it and will accept my paint really well. I already have a painting in mind for this panel, so check back in and I'll show you what I did with it. Also, if you like these videos, please click the like button, subscribe, and share them with your friends. I'm passionate about teaching and I love watching others explore their creativity through art. So keep painting and remember to embrace the imperfection of things, because that's where the magic begins. See you soon.